By 2015, I was done with the life I'd been living in the US. I was getting bored of doing the same things every day, going to the same bars, meeting the same people, and listening to them talking about the same things. You can only do that for so many years until you get to the point where you think like, I need to make a change to my life. If I don't, I'm going to end up a bitter old man, wondering why life passed him by. I didn't want to be that guy, and I knew I needed to do something before it was too late. I always had these kind of feelings throughout my life. Yet, for the earliest stages of my life, I was able to ignore them and pushed the thoughts away as just being a dream that was never going to happen. Throughout the course of my life, these thoughts and dreams started to get stronger, and I wasn't able to ignore them. And you get to the point where you realize it's now or never. I'd never been married in the US, although I had been in relationships. I never had any kids, and that meant that I didn't have any connections, and if I wanted to do something different, I could. It was very difficult, though, to actually make the decision to do something. I'd been to the Philippines twice before, on vacation, and I always dreamed that I would live there someday. One day, when I was looking at the money in my bank and I had $210,000, I thought to myself, if I spend $1,000 a month, I should be able to live for a very long time in the Philippines. So it was kind of one of those decisions that you've been thinking about for such a long time, and then bang, you do it, and your life changes forever. And that is what I was going to do. I was going to move to the Philippines to retire in my 50s. I remember getting to the airport, and a slight feeling of trepidation came over me. Was I really doing the right thing? As much as I was excited, at the same time that I was finally following a dream that I never thought would come true, I did have a little bit of concern that perhaps things wouldn't go according to plan. Getting on the plane, taking off for the first flight to Japan was where I was going to connect to the Philippines. It was an experience that you don't have many of. While I'd been to the Philippines before, it was only for a vacation, which meant that I was going to return. This time, I was going with the intention to stay there forever, and it felt special, yet a little bit scary at the same time. I changed planes in Japan, and that went smoothly, yet when we were flying from Japan to Manila, we heard a huge bang in one of the engines, and the pilot comes on and says we need to divert, which we did. That was a hair-raising experience, and one of those moments where you think, is this the sign of something to come? Yet the following day, I finally got to Manila, although it was a day late than expected. It was amazing to finally be there, and it was time to start this new version of my life, and I really couldn't wait because I'd been thinking about it forever. Quite literally. I remembered Manila from my previous times there, yet there are someone who's going to live there. It's more of a special experience. In the hotel, looking out over Makati, and this feeling that the world is your oyster and anything's possible. I was going to spend 2 weeks in Manila, a week up in Angeles City and a week in Cebu, and then pick out which place I liked best. I'd been to all those places before, but I wanted to test what living there was like as opposed to just visiting. That month was a crazy month, but one of the best months I've had. While I was spending way more money than my budget allowed, I had allowed for a bit of leeway during my first weeks there. I didn't know where I wanted to live yet. I could have lived anywhere in the Philippines because it all felt amazing. While I had my preferred places, it was more to do with the things that were available in those places other than the places themselves. My ideal kind of place would have been a very quiet island, somewhere like Bohol, yet with all the amenities and restaurants and availability that you got in Manila. I knew that wasn't even remotely possible, but I think that's why I settled on Cebu, because it was somewhere I was always interested in, and it felt like a mixture of both those places. It was a very good compromise, I thought, in order to live a good life. After about a month of travelling around, that's when I found somewhere to rent in Cebu. It was only a small apartment, but it was a short walk away from a beach. It wasn't in downtown Cebu, yet I could get there very quickly if I needed to. I'd already decided what my budget was before I left, but I did plan on settling what my budget would be when I actually arrived. $210,000, $1,000 a month. That was what I thought before I left. But after I'd spent time there and found what it was like and what I didn't like, I did decide that I would allow myself $1,200 a month instead. It would make a big difference. My money would go down more, but with the interest I was getting on some of the savings that I left at home, I knew that it would be enough if I was sensible. There were some things that I wanted to buy to get myself set up. I wanted to buy a motorcycle so I could get about easily. I couldn't afford a car really, and I wanted to buy things for the apartment I rented to make it feel like home. Just very minor things, so I probably spent about $3,000 on everything. That was for the motorcycle and everything that I needed for the apartment, and it did feel like home, although it was only small. My initial thoughts when I started retired life living in Cebu was that I was doing things properly. One thing that sticks in mind from that time was when I was having a drink in a bar, and I was speaking to another foreigner there who was looking really upset about something. I was the guy who would go and speak to someone if they seemed to be in trouble to see if I could help out in any way, and I found out that it was his last night in Cebu because he'd just separated from his wife, and his wife kept the house and the car, and he'd spent all his money getting himself this perfect retirement on the island, in a perfect house with a perfect wife, only to find out that his wife wasn't perfect. He didn't have any money left in order to stay there, and all he said was that he wanted to stay there. I felt really bad for him, but I thought that there was no chance that something like that was going to happen to me. I'd been careful, I'd done everything properly, and it's not that I felt I was smarter than this guy who was just about to leave the place he wanted to be. It was as if I was more prepared and I wouldn't allow that to happen to me because if it did, it would ruin me. I never thought that I would get into a position like that. It was just so far away from what I thought would happen that I didn't even have any concerns that it was going to be part of my reality. I bet you're going to think I'm going to say, here's the point that I met a girl half my age and fell in love and got married, and that's how I lost my money. Yet that's not exactly what happened, because I knew very well that I wasn't going to meet a girl that was too young for me, because it was just a recipe for disaster. I'm not going to lie that it wasn't tempting, because it was. I was in a bar in Cebu. It was just a normal bar, and I was speaking to a girl who was in her 20s, and she appeared to be interested in me. I knew she wasn't interested in me as a person, she was interested in me as a provider, so it just felt wrong, and I didn't want to be in a position where I was going to be supporting someone younger than me, and who would expect things from me, who actually wouldn't want to be with me for me. That was somewhere where I drew the line. I wasn't going to get into a relationship with someone who was too young. One thing I did find though, if you get into a relationship in the Philippines with someone who is older, perhaps in their late 30s or 40s, then you're not going to be able to find someone who didn't have kids. I never had kids, and I wanted someone who didn't have kids. But I quickly came to the understanding that it wasn't going to happen, it wasn't possible, so it was a compromise I would have to make. But I was happy to make it. I quickly found out, though, that I was sticking to my budget of $1,200 a month. And I got into a way of life that some months I spent less than that, yet I wasn't compromising on the things I was doing. I was loving my time, having a great time, yet I always felt like I missed the connection of having a relationship. I'd been in and out of relationships back at home, but never been married. And when you're in that position at the start of a relationship and you're thinking about the future together and everything along those lines, it starts to feel like you're sharing your life with someone, and it's better than spending your time alone. I wasn't actively looking for a relationship though. I wasn't going to force it. But I said to myself after I'd been there for about 6 months that if something came along, I would keep the door open to the possibility. I wasn't about to close the door and write everything off. It was going to be an option that I would take if and when it came across. That's what I was thinking, without doing anything that I would regret. It's amazing how much I was actually loving the Philippines. I was so happy to be there, so happy that I made the decision that saw me moving there. And while I will say that life was everything that I wanted it to be, there was nothing else I would rather have been doing. And when I did meet someone at the shop that she owned, I did quickly decide that I wanted to see if I could get to know her more. She was 42, and she'd been separated from her old husband for a long time. I was quite hesitant initially because she had 5 kids, Yet her youngest was already 15, so it wasn't like there would be a big part of her life moving forwards in the future. I mean, they would be a big part of her life because they were her kids, but she wouldn't be responsible for them when they left home and had their own lives. I met her at the shop, which was in a little part of Cebu, quite a long way from the big city. I was just out on my motorcycle. That was one of the things that I liked to do that was affordable and fun, and it connected me to parts of the island that I hadn't been to. I tried to get out on the bike at least once a week, sometimes twice a week, going to different places, and when I stopped off at her shop with the idea to order a drink, I wanted a Coke. And I was quite used to the situation where sometimes it would be difficult to find a cold drink. This time, her fridge wasn't working. I think the electric was off at the time. I can't remember exactly, but I ordered a Coke and she handed it to me and just laughed and said, "Oh, no, it's warm." I asked if she had any ice or a cold one and she just shook her head and said no. So I got a water instead because that's a bit more bearable to drink when it's not cold. I don't know what it was that made me stay a bit longer and talk to her some more, but she was really lively and bubbly and just like to talk all the time. She was like the person that knew everything about everything, the person that knew what was going on in a different part of the village. She was the person that I always thought I would be, the main man, but she was the main woman, and I appreciated her sense of confidence and the way she held herself, and this was on the first meeting. Because she was 42 and I was in my 50s, I thought that was a big positive. I wasn't after a dream or a fantasy that could see me falling in love with a girl that was too young for me. She was a real woman and she had life experience just like I had. And I felt like, although I was just 10 years older than her, I felt like we were at similar stages of our lives. Although I was retired and she was working still, I was just drawn to her. That's all I can say. I'm trying to describe it as much as I can, but it's difficult to actually get across the feelings because I just liked her for whatever reason. I don't know. Let's leave it at that. When I was drinking the water, I'd put my helmet on one of the wing mirrors on the bike, and I was sweating a lot because it's extremely hot. And she just made a remark, and that's one thing that made me feel like I wanted to talk to her a bit more. I don't know exactly how she said it, but she said something along the lines of, "I bet you could do with a cold shower." Something like that, but in a way where she was insinuating something. Yet, where there was absolutely no possibility that it was going to involve her, yet she did it with a smile on her face as if to say, "I might be 42, but I still know how to live a little." While I said that I did speak to girls before, some of them younger than me, I was very confident and forward in the Philippines in a way that I never was at home, and I just thought it would be fun to ask her if she fancied going out sometime. When I asked her with confidence, and I was just about to jump back on the bike and leave, and thinking she would politely decline, but she gave me a smile and then she said, "What about tonight?" I was really taken aback when she said that, but I just loved how easy she was to talk to and how forward she was, and because of that, I just took the bike to the nearest beach and hung around for a bit. I did feel like I should have had a shower before I went to meet her, but I told her, yeah, I'll come back at 7. I lived a long way away, and because of that, I was probably going to be in the same clothes. I was forewarning her and wanted to make her aware that if I wasn't presentable, it was because I lived such a long way away and I couldn't do anything about it. She just laughed and she didn't mind. I went back to her shop at 7 and she was still open. She said, "Okay, well, I'll close then." And she looked at me and said, "You can have a shower at my house if you want." "Really?" I said. "Okay then." So she took me to her house, and it was actually nicer than lots of other houses in the area. It wasn't a mansion or anything. It had proper walls, proper floors, and the walls were rendered as opposed to bare, and there were no holes around the top of the house like many houses had. She had a proper bathroom, a proper shower, and I was taken aback because there was air conditioning as well, and most of the houses in the area were a lot more basic. I went in, had a shower, and she was waiting outside. We went to a restaurant in the local area. That was my first time in that particular part of Cebu, so I didn't know anything about it. I knew how to get back to the city, but that was about it. So I trusted her to pick a place that would be good, so we sat, ordered food and drink. The first thing I asked her when we were waiting was, "Why did you agree to go on a date with me?" She just said, "Why not? Got nothing else to do." And that's when we started talking about her life, her kids, my life, and why I came to the Philippines. Everything I was thinking I wanted to say. When we were in the restaurant, there were always people coming up to her and saying hi to her, as if she knew everyone. And when I mentioned that to her, she just said that she was from the village and her village is very important to her, and she wanted to be seen as somebody in the village who was there for the people, who was there to make sure that services were functioning. I didn't quite know what she was meaning. It wasn't a paid position or it wasn't a job. She just felt like her community was very important to her, and she always wanted to make sure that things in the area were great. Always getting highs from people, and I really admired the fact that she seemed so connected to where she was from. The reason I did that was because I didn't feel connected to where I came from. I felt connected to the version of my country that seemed to have come to a close over 50 years ago. I felt so out of place in my own country, as if it had changed away from what it used to be into some liberal hellhole, but I always wanted to feel like I had a connection to it. I think that's the only reason why I was drawn to her that evening, because she was who I thought I would have been in a different life. We finished up the meal and she asked if I would fancy going to a bar in the area, just for a few drinks in a very local place, and I was up for that, so we went and we actually walked. I left my bike parked up at the restaurant because the place was only a few minutes away, and again, 2 or 3 people said hi to her. I need you to picture this as a small village, very basic structures, very basic. I don't know how many times I can say basic, but don't picture the middle of Cebu, for example. Picture a village. Yeah, perhaps you might call it a town if it wasn't that small, and it did have paved roads and things, so it's not like we were in the city and people knew who she was, if that makes sense. We got to this bar, which was nothing more than a few plastic tables outside a shop very similar to her own. The ones with big metal bars in front of them so people couldn't get inside. She asked me what I wanted and I just told her to order for me anything she liked. So she brought over 2 1-litre bottles of Red Horse. I just thought, is anyone actually joining us? If you know Red Horse, it's a very strong beer. I think it's got a bit of gin in it. And I just wondered if she was going to drink all that. And she said, well, it's going to last all night. She wasn't bothered that it was going to get warm and there was no ice. What I would have done is ordered a lot of smaller ones, but for her, one bigger one was cheaper. So that's why she did that. So I did drink warm beer after about the first 10 minutes, but I wasn't bothered. When we were there were other people coming and going, and someone came over to her and started talking to her in the local language. When I asked her what it was about, she just said it was something to do with the local church, how they were collecting money for something, and she was asked if she could donate, so she did. She gave them 1,000 pesos, which for her was a lot of money. Although she did seem to have more than many people, she still wasn't wealthy. That was when she was talking about how much the area meant to her. Just like I said, she loved raising money for things in the area that would benefit it. I thought it was really admirable. And when it was time to leave, I was a little bit drunk, so I thought I might go and look for a hotel, but she said no, come and stay with me. By this point, her kids would have been back from school, at least the ones that still welt, and I did feel uncomfortable going to her house with the kids there, so I did decline and just said I'd happily meet you another day. That was when I remembered I had a few bits to do in Cebu the following day, so I had to do that. But I did tell her how about the weekend, which was in 3 days' time. She said it sounded great, and she said, do you want my number? I said no. I know where your shop is. I want you to think about it for 3 days, if I'm actually going to come or not. Then I'm going to surprise you by showing up. She laughed and said, I bet you don't. I did though, just as promised. I arrived around 10 a.m. on the Saturday and her eyes lit up when she saw me. One of her kids was there, the youngest who was 15, and she introduced me saying that I was her friend. Her child was very polite, and I thought this was a good reflection on her for bringing her up so well. She went on to talk that her eldest 3 were living in the city and they had good jobs. They made more money than many people did, but it still wasn't a fortune. But for the Philippines, it was quite good. She talked about how it was her dream that all her kids would move to the city because they could have better lives there. As much as she loved her community, she thought it was a place for them to return to when they retired, or the place that they could go every weekend and live in the houses they had there, but they worked and lived mainly in the city. She left her shop for her kid to look after and jumped on the back of my bike and said, where do you want to go? I just had to tell her I've got no idea. This is only my second time in this part of Cebu, and it's hugely different to the places I've been before, so you tell me where we can go. She just said, okay, just listen to what I say and follow my directions and I'll take you somewhere. That sounded like it was a good idea to me, so we set off and she says left, then I drive for a bit and she says right, turn here. We drive there for a mile or so and then she says turn left again. And then I could see the sea in the distance and it was similar the way to where I went to the beach when I was waiting for her before. Then when I saw the beach in the distance, instead of going towards it, she just told me to turn right, and then she said, just stop here. I did exactly as she said, and I didn't know where we were, but I got off the bike and looked up and noticed that we were at a hotel. Is this okay? She said, with a really big smile on her face. I didn't know what to say, so I went along with it, and 3 hours later, we'd already left the hotel, and this relationship was something that I needed now, as opposed to only thought about. For the rest of the day, I just felt like everything was coming together so well. I'd settled into my retirement, I was living well within budget, and now I've met a woman who seemed to be interested in me even more than I was interested in her. I didn't even think something like that was possible. I asked her quite bluntly after we had a few drinks later on that evening what this was all about. She just said that she was in a relationship about 4 years before, and ever since that one failed, she hasn't been in a relationship since. She always wanted one. She seemed to want what I wanted, just someone to have a relationship with and to have company. She didn't give me any more details about the relationship, but if she had, that would have been grounds for me to have decided if this relationship was something I wanted or not. But I would learn later that she was in a relationship with another guy from America. He was the one who built the house, and he left because of certain reasons that would mean I would also be leaving. Yet I still don't know if she was just being malicious, or if it was who she was that caused this to happen. I will never know. I lived a long way away, and I told her, well, I like you. Do you like me? And she said yes. I hadn't liked anyone as much as you for a long time. And then I started saying, well, how are we going to make this work? She just said, well, how about we go on 2 dates a week for a month, and we can see how things go from there. You'll have to come to me, though, she said. You're retired. What's the problem? And I thought, yeah, no problem. I can do that. I didn't have anything else to do, and it didn't cost very much money to put gas in the bike, so that's what I did. I actually went 3 times a week for a month, and every time I was on the way there, I was really excited at the prospect of spending more time with her and learning more things about her that I didn't yet know. At the end of that month, I felt like I was inseparable from her. The idea of not being with her was an idea that I didn't want to think about. And when she told me that her last relationship was with another foreigner at this point, and it was him that built the house, when he left, it was because he didn't understand the village. The problem was, if she told me at the start, I didn't have those feelings for her then. Now I started to have those feelings. But what she said was, he didn't understand the village. I need to say it again. What you really need to do is put understand in inverted commas. I think that's the best thing. Yet, I don't know how you can express that. But now I felt like the thought of not seeing her anymore was worse than the thought of what happened to this other foreigner. And she just said that he didn't understand the village. Use those inverted commas again. I asked her what she would think about moving to the city, and she just said no way. Her children still went to school there, and while they were only 2 of them going to school and the youngest was 15, it was still their time. She said, well, you can come and live in the village, move into my house. She really seemed like she wanted me to move into the house, and I thought, why not? Why can't I do that? What's the problem if I did that? And she said, don't worry about paying rent or anything, you can just come and live here. I thought I would try it. I felt like we were the perfect match. The age difference wasn't crazy, and she seemed to be a respected person in her village. What more could I want? I arranged to have my things moved, the little bits I had from the apartment I was renting to her place, and I moved in with her just like that. It was weird initially because her kids were there, but they seemed to appreciate the fact that their mom was happy. I guess it was only a week after I'd moved in that someone came from the church, from the community, soliciting donations. I didn't really pay much attention to it, but she said that she was going to give them 1,000 pesos, and then she asked, how about you give them 10,000 pesos as a donation, and that will make us look really good in the village? I'd never heard of anything like this before, so I went along with it. It's not like she was getting the money out of me, it was going to a good cause, so I just gave them the money. I didn't know that would be the starting point of what appeared to be her addiction to being a very important person in her village. I didn't know. I didn't build a house, didn't buy anything for her, but I thought that by helping her with this ambition to be someone of importance, that it would rub off on me as well, yet that's not what happened. I did love her, I will admit that, and she told me lots of times that she loved me. But throughout the 3 years that I was living there, I guess I was responsible for quite a lot of improvements in the village. I didn't pay close attention to what I was doing to start with, because I was very happy and in the moment, and I always thought I would have a place to live with her. I wanted to get married to her, but she was still married to her first husband from years ago, so that wasn't possible. But she continued to run her shop, and she continued to be great in that sense. But there was always something coming up that needed a donation or somebody that needed help, and she always wanted to be the person to help. I thought in the early stages of this happening that she genuinely wanted to help people because she wanted to help them. I would learn later, when it was already too late, that it wasn't just about helping people, it was about the adoration that she got from being able to help people. And the worst of it was when she somehow got me to donate around $10,000 to build a little place in the village where people could play with their children. I didn't know how she got me to agree to that, but I did, and I'm still scratching my head thinking about it today. And while I said I didn't build a house, I did spend a little bit of money improving hers. The fact that another foreigner had built it and I was living in it did feel weird. Thinking about that was something I tried to avoid, but I thought if I put a bit of touches on it, it would make it ours as opposed to hers. And I was doing things of the understanding that my income and my budget doesn't matter as much because I've got a place to live that doesn't cost me anything. And in the yard we had lots of trees with fruit, so my living expenses were a lot less there. But I just couldn't stop helping out when she asked, for random things to do with the village. I already dipped into the account I had in the States when I left 3 years ago, and I'm paying very close attention to the fact that my money's going down. Yet, I only started to notice when it was too late, when I'd spent over $100,000. That was when I nearly had a heart attack and understood that me being in the Philippines was now so connected to this woman I was living with that if I wasn't with her, perhaps I wouldn't even be able to stay there. When I tried to cut back on things to help the community out, which was something she was proud of, she felt like she wasn't this big person in the village she always wanted to be. She was addicted to status. That's the word I've been looking for and thinking about for a long time ever since it happened. And I've just thought of it. She was addicted to status. And as soon as I said we needed to cut back, that was when she said, "Well, you never told me that you'd have to cut back. And we're building something together in the village. And we're going to be respected and well known, and people are going to love us." I told her that we need to think about ourselves, and she said, "Well, I'm fine. I was fine before you were here, and you'll be fine too." I just said it's different because I'm not from here. I never asked her why she no longer was with her old partner who was foreign, but that was the first time I thought I would ask, and she just said that he ran out of money. "Did you love him?" I asked her. "Yes, I did." "Do you want me to run out of money?" I asked. "No, I don't." "Well, you have to choose, the village or me. If you want me to give any more money for any kind of community project, it's going to be not possible." She said that was fine, and I thought she meant it. Unfortunately, the addiction was too difficult for her to handle, and over the next few months, I must have given over more money to her, and it got to a stage where the relationship just had to end, and I was heartbroken. I still had money left, but I realised that I didn't have enough to last me a long time, so that was when I went into a phase of just drinking away my troubles. I drank through a lot of money, couldn't believe how I'd found myself there. After everything I thought I was doing, everything I thought I was going to have in retirement, I'd lost all my money because I was with someone who I loved, and who I actually think genuinely loved me, but she was addicted to the status that she had in the village of being someone who always was there to help others and to help with projects and there to donate when people needed it. Always for the people, because she felt that would make her respected and loved amongst everyone there. Yet all it did was make me lose money, and then I lost the rest of it just trying to get over the devastation. When I had $10,000 left, I knew the writing was on the wall and I had to return home. I had to get another job. But what I did do was move to a completely different side of the country altogether, because the thought of going back to my hometown was enough to finish me off. That was when everything ended for me, and that's where I am today. It was very quick how it went from being so good to everything collapsing around me, and if I never stopped at her shop, I wonder what my life would have been like today. I guess I'd either be living there now, or I'd have met someone and done something else stupid, because I think that's just how I was wired. I couldn't help it. I was living in the moment too much, and I was having the time of my life, but that cost me my dream retirement, and I think about it every single day since I've been back. A few years have passed, but I still think about it, and that's where I want to be. But although I'm going to be a little bit older, I have worked hard since then, and I think I might be able to have another go. I'll have to stick to $1,000 a month. The problem is, though, I want a relationship. I want to be with someone, and I've got to accept I need to choose. Living in the Philippines forever, or living in the Philippines until my money runs out again because I got into another relationship. I know what I should do, but I don't know what I will do, and that's scary.